Hi, my name is Emily Carter. 2 months ago, I found myself standing in the rain on the steps of the Hale family's estate, soaked, humiliated, and numb. That night, I begged my fiancé's wealthy family for help to save my mother's life. They looked at me like I was dirt under their heels, and Nathan, the man I thought I was going to marry, simply said, "Emily, I'm not your charity. Don't ever put me in this position again." Then he turned and walked back inside their grand, gleaming house like I hadn't just poured every ounce of dignity I had onto their polished marble floor. I didn't know where I was walking when I left. I just knew I had to keep moving. The rain had gone from a soft drizzle to a bone-chilling downpour, soaking through my cardigan and jeans. My boots squished with every step on the winding roads of Asheville's hillside neighborhoods, where the homes looked more like galleries than places people actually lived. I didn't belong there, not in their world, not anymore. The cold bit into my skin, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I kept thinking of Mom, Margaret, alone in that hospital room, hooked up to machines while her name sat on a transplant list like a number in a lottery. The doctors said she needed a kidney within months. Dialysis was no longer enough. A surgery could stabilize her, but it would cost over $140,000. And I didn't have it. I didn't have anything. I had been so sure Nathan would help. We'd talked about forever, about merging our lives. But when tested, he'd folded faster than paper in a storm. No compassion, no defense, just silence, and then rejection. Every step I took away from the Hale mansion was like peeling off a layer of who I used to be. The Emily who believed in love, in second chances, in people doing the right thing when it mattered. She was dissolving with every drop of rain. I didn't know how long I'd been walking. My thoughts swirled like leaves in a gutter. I passed storefronts already closed for the night, their windows fogged from the temperature drop. Asheville had always been cold in March, but that night it felt like it wanted to freeze me from the inside out. Then I saw him, an elderly man sitting on a wooden bench under the awning of a bus stop near South French Broad Avenue. He was hunched over, clutching a worn paper bag in one hand and a twisted cane in the other. His jacket was threadbare, barely shielding him from the wind. His white hair clung wet to his scalp, and his face was tight with pain. He looked forgotten. I hesitated. I had nothing to give. Not money, not warmth, not even hope. But something about the way he sat there holding that paper bag like it contained his whole world pulled at me. I walked up quietly. "Sir, are you okay?" His eyes lifted slowly, gentle and cloudy with age. He spoke with a slight Korean accent. "I missed the earlier bus. Need to get to the hospital. My grandson, he fell. Head injury." "Mission Hospital?" I asked. He nodded. I only have $1. My heart twisted. I didn't have room for anyone else's pain that night. I was barely standing myself. But still, I dug into my coat pocket and pulled out the last $5 bill I had. I handed it to him, without a word. The man's hands trembled as he took it. "I will pay you back," he whispered. "You don't have to," I said, my voice barely louder than the rain. "It's just a bus ride." We sat together on that damp bench, the cold seeping into my bones. I didn't even try to brush the wet hair from my face. I just stared at the empty street ahead of us, wondering how everything in my life had unraveled so fast. The man looked at the bracelet on my wrist, an old wooden bangle, rough and slightly chipped. "That," he said softly. "Handmade?" I looked down at it. "Yeah, my father carved it. He passed away when I was a teenager. My mom kept it for years and gave it to me the night she went into the hospital. Said it was strength in disguise." He smiled, the corners of his mouth barely moving. "It looks like it still is." His words caught me off guard. It wasn't the first time someone had commented on the bracelet, but it was the first time someone really saw it for what it was. Before I could reply, the bus arrived with a loud hiss and blink of headlights. We climbed on. The man paid the fare, handing the crumpled bill to the driver with both hands, like it was a sacred offering. We sat in silence. I didn't expect anything to come of that moment. No revelation, no reward, just one tired human helping another. When the bus reached the hospital, he turned to me before getting off. "My name is Mr. Myong," he said quietly. "Thank you, miss." "Emily," I replied. "Emily," he repeated. "You are not broken, just reshaping." He gave me a nod that felt like a blessing. Then he disappeared through the sliding glass doors of the ER. I rode the bus back to my tiny studio apartment, the windows fogged from the inside. I stripped off my soaked clothes, dried my hair with a towel, and stared at the ceiling. My mother was still in danger. My bank account was still empty. Nathan was still gone. But something about that night, something about Mr. Myong's words, settled deep into my chest, like a quiet ember. Maybe I wasn't broken. Not yet. And maybe kindness, even the kind that feels pointless in the moment, has a way of circling back. I didn't know it then, but that night on the bench would change everything. It would lead me to someone who didn't just save my mother, but helped me save myself. I spent the next 2 days drifting through my life like a ghost. My mom's condition had stabilized for the moment, but the doctors were blunt. Stability wasn't survival. Without the transplant, or at least an intervention to improve her kidney function, we were on borrowed time. I tried everything. I called charities, applied for emergency grants, reached out to friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Some offered prayers. A few sent links to GoFundMe pages for people who didn't look like me. People who'd somehow gone viral for being sick. None of them sent money. My apartment, just 2 rooms above a bakery in West Asheville, felt smaller every hour. A pile of medical bills had taken over the kitchen counter. I couldn't bring myself to throw away the coffee from 2 mornings ago. I'd heat it up in the microwave like that might warm something in me too. And all the while, I couldn't stop thinking about that night at the bus stop. About the old man who said I was reshaping. That bracelet my father made, I'd found myself touching it constantly like a nervous tick or maybe a tether to a version of myself I hadn't lost completely. Strong, capable, still standing. Then came the call. It was late, past 10 p.m. The sky outside my window was charcoal black, and the only light in the room came from my phone screen. An unknown number blinked on the display. I almost didn't answer. "Hello?" My voice was rough, tired. "Hi," came a calm, warm, male voice. "Is this Emily Carter?" "Yes." "This is Noah Kim. I'm Mr. Myong's grandson." I sat up so fast the blanket slipped from my shoulders. "Is he okay?" "He's fine, really. I just wanted to call and say thank you for what you did the other night. My grandfather told me everything. He doesn't usually talk about people the way he talked about you." I was quiet, unsure what to say. "Honestly," he went on, "he insisted I call you. Said you were someone worth knowing." "That's kind," I murmured, "but I didn't really do anything. You gave him your last $5 in the freezing rain and sat with him. That's not nothing." I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to soften. "How is he now?" "He's better. My fall wasn't as bad as they thought. Concussion, a few stitches. I'm out of the hospital now, but he keeps talking about that night, about your bracelet, about how you reminded him of someone." "That's sweet," I said, smiling faintly for the first time all day. There was a pause. Then Noah added, "He told me your mom's sick, that you needed help." My stomach dropped. I stood up and began pacing my living room, my fingers curling into the hem of my sleeve. "He didn't have to tell you that." "He didn't tell me everything," Noah said gently, "but enough. I wasn't looking for anything in return." "I know, that's why I want to help." The words landed like a stone in my chest. "Help?" I echoed. "I run a small design consultancy," he said, "mostly in architecture and furniture. My grandfather and I used to do woodwork together before his arthritis got worse. I've done well the past few years, well enough that I could help with your mom's medical costs." I sat down slowly, my knees suddenly weak. "Noah, you don't even know me." "I know what it feels like to watch someone you love fade away because you can't afford to save them," he said quietly. "When my mom got sick, we lost everything. I was 19 and no one helped, not a soul. I promised myself, if I ever could, I'd be the one to step in." The silence between us stretched, thick with something I couldn't name. My throat tightened. "I can't take your money," I whispered. "Then don't," he replied. "Let me invest it. In your mother's life. In someone good." Tears stung my eyes, uninvited and hot. "It's $140,000, Noah." "I know, and I know exactly what that number feels like. That's why I'm serious." I covered my mouth with one hand, trying to stay quiet. I didn't want to sob into the phone like a child. I didn't want to admit how desperate I really was. "I'm not a project," I finally said. "I don't see you that way," he replied. "You're not some charity case. You're a daughter trying to save her mother. That's all I need to know." Another pause. "I'll wire the funds directly to the hospital," Noah added. "You won't have to handle anything. Just focus on your mom." I looked at the stack of bills on the counter, the Post-it notes with urgent scribbles, the quote from the transplant team, the insurance denials, all of it. "Emily?" he asked softly. I took a shaky breath. "Yes. Okay. You're sure?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm sure." When the call ended, I stared at the dark screen of my phone for a long time. Something inside me had cracked open, not broken, but opened. I whispered aloud, "Mom might live." And for the first time in what felt like months, I believed it. The next morning, I walked into Mission Hospital with different shoes, a dry coat, and a steel in my spine I hadn't felt in weeks. My bracelet clinked softly against the doorframe as I entered her room. She was still asleep, still pale, still fragile, but I took her hand and whispered, "We're not giving up." I stayed there the whole day. Nurses came and went. Doctors checked vitals and discussed treatment. No one asked how I paid for it. No one judged me. By the time I left, the sun had set behind the mountains, casting the sky in streaks of rust and lavender. I walked home slowly, every footstep grounding me. At the corner of Haywood and Depot, I paused and looked up. Somewhere in the city, a stranger had become my lifeline, not because I begged, but because I'd offered something once with no expectation. That bracelet around my wrist? It didn't feel like a reminder anymore. It felt like a beginning. A week after the hospital wired confirmation that my mother's transplant deposit had been fully paid, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, it's Noah. Hope your mom's doing better. Would you meet me for coffee?" I stared at the screen for a moment. Part of me had expected the silence to stretch longer, that maybe he'd done this generous thing and disappeared, like some kind of ghost of goodwill. But here he was again, offering more than just money. I hesitated, then typed, "Sure, when and where?" He suggested a local cafe downtown, Summit Grind, a small place tucked into a brick corner building near the art co-op district. I'd passed it before, but never gone inside. It always looked warm, with big windows and mismatched furniture, like a place where stories waited to be told. I arrived 5 minutes early. The air outside still held a bite of spring chill, and I clutched my sketchbook to my chest like it might protect me. Yes, sketchbook. Something I hadn't touched in months. But the night after Noah's call, I found myself flipping through the pages again. Old designs, rough outlines of wood furniture, tables with hidden drawers, armoires carved with leaf motifs. My father had taught me how to draw those curves, how to work with grain instead of against it. That sketchbook was the first place I'd ever believed I could build something from nothing. Noah was already there when I walked in. He stood as soon as he saw me, waving with a small, easy smile. In daylight, he looked less like a rescuer and more like someone who belonged in this town. Worn denim jacket, rolled sleeves, calloused hands. No flash, just quiet confidence. "Emily," he said, shaking my hand. "Thanks for coming." I sat down across from him. "Of course." He didn't start with small talk. After a few sips of coffee, he leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I've been thinking about you," he said, his tone serious. "Not in a weird way," he added quickly, smiling sheepishly. "I mean your story, your mom, that bracelet." I nodded slowly. "Okay." He reached into a leather folio beside him and pulled out a thin folder. He slid it toward me. I opened it, half expecting a repayment plan or legal document. Instead, I found articles, market reports, business cards. One page read in bold, "Asheville's custom design gap. The need for mid-range independent craft studios." I looked up. "What is this?" "No strings," he said. "Just an idea. I've been watching this market for a while. There's a gap. Too many overpriced boutique showrooms. Too many big box stores with no soul. People here, especially in the arts district, they want handmade, local, meaningful. And you could build that." I blinked. He went on. "Furniture. Decor. You've got the eye for it, Emily. I saw your sketches, your Instagram from last year before you stopped posting. Carved headboards, accent tables, the reclaimed wood dining set. That stuff, it has heart." My throat tightened. That was a different life. "It doesn't have to be," he said. I closed the folder. "Why me?" "Because you're talented, and because you didn't wait for a reason to be kind." He paused. "I invest in people like that." I leaned back. "Invest?" He nodded. "I want to fund your start. No loans, no interest. I'll cover the initial cost of materials, a shared workshop space I can help you access, and basic setup. You own it. Completely. You run it. I just want to help you get off the ground." It sounded impossible. "It's too much," I whispered. "You've already done enough, more than anyone ever has." "You saved my grandfather," he said plainly. "To you, it was just $5 and a little warmth. To me, it's the reason I still have him. Let me do this." A war raged inside me. Gratitude, fear, pride, hope. "I don't want to feel like I owe you forever," I murmured. "Then don't." He looked me in the eye. "But there is one condition." I stiffened. "There it is." He held up a hand. "Not what you think. I don't want a cut of your business, or your time, or your freedom. I just want to be part of the process. As a mentor, maybe a partner in planning, not in ownership. I believe in guidance over control." I studied him. The way he spoke, calm, measured. No smirk, no ego, just belief. But still, a voice inside me whispered, "Don't give away the blueprint to your life again." I looked down at my coffee. "I'll think about it." "Of course," he said, not even slightly surprised. He reached into the folder and pulled out a business card. "My number's on the back. When you're ready." We parted outside the cafe. He didn't press, didn't ask when I'd decide, just gave me a nod and disappeared into the crowd of pedestrians. That night, I spread my old sketches across my bed, pages curled at the edges, smudged, forgotten. But they were still mine, still waiting. A few days later, I was granted access to the shared co-working studio Noah had mentioned. He'd pulled some strings and told the manager I was a referral under his business. I didn't have to pay anything yet. It wasn't glamorous. Just a small open space with creaky floors, a few drafting tables, and an old lathe that probably needed more love than I could give. But it smelled like sawdust and potential. I set up my pencils, pulled out my old compass, took a breath, and sketched. The lines came slowly at first. My hands were stiff, my ideas unsure. But then something clicked. It was a design my dad and I had started together, a low-profile coffee table with dovetail joints and a drawer hidden inside the central beam. I'd abandoned it when he died, left the sketch unfinished. Now I completed it. For the first time in months, I felt right. Not rescued, not indebted, just capable. I didn't know if I'd say yes to Noah's full offer, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't drowning anymore. I was building. The first time I saw my name mentioned in a local business blog, I was holding a chisel in one hand and a cup of lukewarm coffee in the other. Local artisan revives Appalachian. Style with heartfelt woodwork. I blinked at the screen, then read it again. The article featured a photo of the coffee table I'd just finished, the one based on my dad's original design. The writer, a blogger who'd passed through the co-working space the week before, had snapped a few pictures and asked for a quote. I hadn't expected him to actually publish it, let alone give it a title like that, but there it was. My name. Emily Carter. Attached to something new. Something mine. For a brief moment, I let myself feel proud. I printed the article and brought it to the hospital that night. My mother had just started physical therapy post-surgery, and though she was still weak, she beamed when she read the first line aloud. "I knew you'd find your way back to this," she whispered, squeezing my hand. I held on tight. "It's only the beginning." It was. Over the next 2 weeks, things began to shift. Slowly, steadily. I took on 2 small custom orders, one from a neighbor who saw the blog post, another from a local gallery that wanted a display bench made from reclaimed wood. Noah checked in, but kept his distance. True to his word, he never pushed, never asked for credit or recognition. He just sent the occasional text. "Saw your bench in the shop window. Gorgeous work. Don't forget to breathe between projects." It was quiet support, the kind that doesn't hover but never lets you fall. And for a while I felt steady. Until I didn't. It started with a phone call from the gallery. "Hey, Emily," said the owner, a woman named Laurel. "I just wanted to check something with you. We got an odd message today." "What kind of message?" "A woman. Didn't leave her name, called and said she was from a local paper, claimed you'd falsified part of your background, that your designs weren't really yours, and that you'd been in legal trouble?" My stomach twisted. "That's not true," I said, voice shaking. "I didn't think so," Laurel replied, "but it's a small town. Rumors move fast. Just wanted you to be aware." I thanked her, then sat in silence on the floor of my studio, my mind racing. Only one person could have started this. Vivian Hale. I hadn't seen or heard from her since the night she turned her back on me, but she had power, and she knew how to use it. Within days, the whispers spread. People I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly viewed me with polite caution. A potential vendor pushed our meeting a week out, then never rescheduled. One of my new clients canceled a custom order, citing unexpected budget cuts. But I saw the shift in her eyes when she walked into the studio. I was being erased. Again. At first I tried to ignore it, to outwork it. I doubled down. Sketched until midnight. Posted new designs online. Tried to flood the narrative with truth. But the damage had started to seep in. Not just to my work, but to my confidence. Then the worst came. A blog post. Anonymous. But clearly written by someone with access to the Hale family. Local woodworker linked to scandal. Emily Carter's history with Asheville elite. It painted me as a gold digger. Claimed I'd manipulated Nathan Hale into a relationship to gain money for my so-called business, then blamed the family when I didn't get what I wanted. The post ended with a smug warning to beware of sob stories packaged as handmade success. I felt sick. The bracelet on my wrist suddenly felt heavy, dirty, like even it could be twisted into something shameful. I didn't want to call Noah. I didn't want him to know that the people who once hurt me were now coming for everything I was trying to build. But he called me first. "I saw it," he said quietly. "You okay?" "No," I admitted. Do you want me to respond? I can release a statement, publicly defend you." "No," my voice cracked. "They'll just say you're biased." "You're not alone in this, Emily." "I know," I whispered, "but this has to come from me." That night, I walked to the studio alone, sat at my work table with every light off, let the silence press against me like a wave. Then I pulled out my sketchbook. I didn't sketch furniture this time. I drew Vivian, sitting in her manicured living room, dripping pearls, sipping judgment like tea. Then I drew me, on that bench by the bus stop, soaked to the bone but still upright. I drew the bracelet, my father's hands carving it, and I wrote 3 words beneath the page: "They don't decide." The next morning, I wrote a letter, a real one, not a blog post, not a press release. I told my story, the truth, from beginning to now. I sent it to the same blogger who wrote the first piece about me, attached photos of my work, of my sketches, a shot of me and Mom at the hospital, her wearing the bracelet now. He published it under the title, "The Woman on the Bench, Emily Carter Speaks." And the tide began to turn. People remembered what they saw with their own eyes. Customers reposted my work. Friends shared their stories about me. The co-working space invited me to speak at a community event for women artisans. Vivian never responded. Neither did Nathan. But that didn't matter, because I had something they couldn't fake: truth, and a story worth telling. The gallery was already buzzing with voices when I stepped inside. Warm light spilled from pendant bulbs overhead, casting golden shadows on the hardwood floor. Dozens of guests milled about, wine glasses in hand, leaning over carved furniture, canvas paintings, and delicate ceramics. A banner near the entrance read, "Hands That Build, Celebrating Asheville's Independent Makers." It felt surreal to see my name listed on the program, right next to established artists I'd followed for years. My display stood near the back, a handcrafted writing desk with a hidden drawer system, made from salvaged cherry wood and etched with a winding vine pattern that mirrored a sketch I found in one of my father's old notebooks. I stood beside it, fidgeting with the bracelet on my wrist. This was the first time I'd shown a piece publicly under my full name, Emily Carter. No aliases, no hiding. I should have been proud. Instead, my chest buzzed with static. Ever since my letter had gone public and shifted the tide, I'd been waiting for the next blow. I knew Vivian Hale wouldn't stay silent forever, not when she'd built her life around control. And sure enough, she arrived 30 minutes into the show. I spotted her the moment she walked in, her posture regal, her lips set in that polite predator's smile. She wore ivory silk and gold earrings that probably cost more than my rent. Nathan wasn't with her. He never was, not anymore. But she didn't need backup. Her presence alone stirred the air. I caught her scanning the room. When her eyes landed on me, she didn't flinch. She walked straight over. A few heads turned. Someone nudged their friend. The energy in the room shifted. People sensed the tension before it had a name. "Emily?" she said, her voice smooth as lacquer. "I see you're still telling stories." I met her gaze, only the true ones. Her smile didn't waver. "Truth is a slippery thing, dear, easily shaped to fit the narrative." I gestured to the desk behind me. "Unlike wood, that always tells you where it's willing to go." Her smile thinned. I should have left it at that. Let her walk away. But I was done letting her define the room. I straightened my spine. "Vivian, why are you here?" She looked around, feigning interest in a nearby sculpture. "Supporting the arts, of course. This town thrives on community. You've never stepped foot in the local co-op, never once invested in local makers. Until now." She turned back to me, voice low. "You think because a few people reposted your sob story that you've won. But let me remind you, reputation isn't built on sentiment. It's built on lineage, on legacy." "Then maybe you should have left me alone to build mine." Her lips curled. "You really believe this lasts? That people will choose your handcrafted grief over polished success? I paused. Let the silence settle between us. Then I reached under the desk and pulled out a small square drawer, one of the hidden compartments I'd designed. From inside, I took a photo, a black and white image of my parents standing in front of the same desk, decades earlier. My father smiling with sawdust on his sleeves, my mother holding a cup of tea on the edge of the wood. I held it out. This was their desk. I restored it, redesigned it, not because I wanted sympathy, but because their hands built everything I am. Vivian stared at the photo, her expression unreadable. I added, legacy isn't about whose name is on a building. It's about who shows up when it matters. I showed up. A hush had fallen over the area around us. Guests stood a little closer. A few had subtly leaned in, pretending to examine artwork nearby, but their attention was fixed on us. Vivian's face hardened. Be careful, Emily. Sentiment burns quickly, and when it does, all that remains is ash. She turned to walk away. I didn't stop her, but I spoke loud enough for others to hear. Then it's a good thing I work with hardwood. Fire can't destroy everything. A few people chuckled softly. Someone murmured, "Damn right." Vivian didn't look back. Later that evening, after most guests had drifted toward the catering table or taken seats for the speaker session, a woman approached my display. She wore a simple wool coat and had kind eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. "Hi," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Ellen Walsh. I'm curating a new section at the Folk Art Museum in Raleigh. We're showcasing Southern makers with generational roots in craftsmanship." My pulse quickened. "I read your story, and I saw what just happened here. I think your voice belongs in the exhibit." I blinked. "You want to feature my work?" "More than that," she said. "We'd like you to create a piece specifically for the show. A functional item, bench, cabinet, whatever speaks to you. We'll cover all costs." I felt the room spin gently beneath my feet. I'd be honored." She smiled. "You've got something rare, Emily. Skill, sure. But conviction? That's what lasts." When she walked away, I leaned against the desk for support. Noah appeared a few minutes later, holding 2 plastic cups of cider. "I saw her talking to you," he said, offering me one. "Museum, right?" I nodded. "She wants a commissioned piece." "That's amazing." I looked at him. "Vivian showed up." I figured she might. I didn't back down. He raised his cup. "To standing tall?" We clinked, and for the first time in a long, long while, I felt tall enough to see what might come next. The commission from the Folk Art Museum felt both thrilling and terrifying. For the first few days after Ellen Walsh's offer, I could barely sleep. I kept pacing the studio, sketching late into the night, then tearing up the pages at dawn. I wanted the piece to say everything I couldn't always put into words, about my parents, about Asheville, about rebuilding when the world thinks you're finished. After nearly a week, I settled on a concept, a hope chest. Not the frilly kind with lace and cedar panels that girls used to fill with linens before marriage, but something rooted in heirloom resilience, built from reclaimed walnut and oak, shaped with smooth dovetails and etched with a vine motif that wrapped around the entire frame like it was still growing, even through the grain. I called it "The Root Does Not Forget," because mine hadn't. Every day I worked on it, I thought about my father's hands, how steady they'd been, how quiet his love had looked when he carved something beautiful out of a piece of wood everyone else had walked past. I thought about my mother, too, how she'd held us together with little more than grace and determination after he died. She had given me her strength. Now, I wanted to return it. 3 weeks into the project, I got a call from the hospital. My mother was being discharged. Her numbers had stabilized. She still had a long road ahead with follow-up appointments and dietary restrictions, but she could come home. When I arrived to pick her up, she was already sitting in a wheelchair near the nurse's station, her coat folded neatly across her lap. "Emily," she whispered as I approached. "You look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't," I smiled, "but not for the usual reasons." She narrowed her eyes, mock stern. "You better not be pulling all-nighters again." "I'm building something," I said softly, wheeling her toward the exit. "For a museum." Her lips parted slightly. "What?" "I got commissioned. My work's going to be in Raleigh." For a second, she didn't say anything. Then she reached for my wrist where the wooden bracelet still sat. "You really never gave up," she said. "I tried," I admitted. "A few times, but something always pulled me back." "Your father," she said. "He would have been proud." We drove home in silence, but it wasn't the heavy kind. It was full of quiet understanding. She held the bracelet in her hand the whole ride. Back at the studio, I brought her in the following week to see the progress on the chest. She'd been resting at home while I worked in long, solitary stretches, stopping only for coffee or a text from Noah. When I pulled back the drop cloth and revealed the nearly finished piece, she gasped. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers along the carved vines. "I'm calling it, 'The Root Does Not Forget,'" I said. Tears welled in her eyes. "That's what we are, aren't we? Not what people planted for us, but what we kept alive ourselves." I nodded. She touched the corner joint where two pieces met, perfectly flush. "You learned this from him." "And from you," I said. "Every time you held everything together when it felt like it was falling apart." She smiled through the tears. "I can't believe someone tried to bury this fire in you." "They almost did," I said, "but they didn't know I was flammable in all the right ways." She laughed. "That's my girl." As the days passed, finishing the chest became a kind of ritual. Every sanding stroke felt like a conversation with my past. Every polish, a layer of protection around everything I'd fought to reclaim. When it was finally done, I stepped back and just stared. It wasn't perfect. There were still faint tool marks here and there, a knot in the wood that resisted every smoothing attempt. But it was honest. It had soul, and it held stories in every inch. I loaded it into the truck myself and drove to Raleigh at sunrise, the mountain roads bathed in amber light. The museum team helped me carry it inside, careful with every turn. Ellen met me in the exhibit hall, an airy sunlit room with brick walls and hand-woven banners suspended from the ceiling. She ran her hands along the chest, nodding slowly. "It's more than I hoped for," she said. "It belongs here." I stood beside her in silence, watching as she attached the placard, "Emily Carter. The Root Does Not Forget 2025. Reclaimed walnut and oak, Asheville, North Carolina, where legacy is hand-carved." For the first time in a long time, I felt no need to prove anything, not to the museum, not to the guests, not even to myself. I just stood there, whole. On the drive back, I stopped at a quiet overlook halfway up the ridge, got out, watched the trees sway below, the tips catching slivers of gold through a passing storm cloud. I called Noah. "You finished it?" he asked. "Just dropped it off." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath too. "How does it feel?" "Like I don't need to win anything anymore." He was quiet a moment. "You know, I think that's what real success is." "Not being seen?" I asked. "Number being known, especially by yourself." I smiled. "You helped me get here," I said. "No, Emily," he replied gently. "You were always walking. I just offered directions when the road got dark." We didn't say much else. Didn't need to. The wind rustled the pines beside me, and I thought, this is what coming home to yourself feels like. Not grand, not loud, just right. 6 months later, I opened the doors to Root and Grain, my own workshop studio tucked into a converted brick warehouse just outside the heart of Asheville. The name came to me in a dream, or maybe it had been forming for years. It felt right, a name that spoke to everything beneath the surface. The history in the wood, the stories in the scars, the people behind the pieces. The first thing I displayed in the window was a sideboard made from black walnut, elegant but strong, quiet in its presence, like my mother used to be when she stood behind my father in his early days, supporting without needing applause. Next to it, I placed a framed photo of them together in his original workshop, and beneath it, a simple brass plate, built from where we began. People came, not in droves at first, but they came. Neighbors, curious tourists, a few journalists who remembered the viral post months ago and wondered if I'd stuck with it. I had. I taught weekend classes to women starting over. Women who had been told they were too old, too emotional, too broken to begin again. I handed them chisels and let them shape their own narratives. And in the shavings and sawdust, we built more than furniture. We built ourselves. Mom visited the studio often. Some days she brought lunch. Other times she just sat in the corner with a cup of tea, smiling softly while I worked. She'd recovered slower than expected, but the strength in her presence never dimmed. Noah showed up sometimes too, quietly, never in the way. We'd grab coffee after I locked up or walk the trails behind the co-op district. We didn't define what we were. We didn't need to. One afternoon, as we sat on a bench overlooking the river, he handed me something wrapped in soft linen. I unwrapped it slowly. It was the old wooden bracelet, but not the same. He'd polished it, reinforced the cracked joint, and carved a word inside the band so subtly I almost missed it. Still. I looked up at him. It broke, I whispered. He nodded. And it's still yours. That night I wore it again. Not as a reminder of what had broken, but as proof of what remained. In early spring, I received a letter from a woman in Texas. She'd read about my museum piece in a regional publication. I'm 59, she wrote. I left a controlling marriage and started building birdhouses in my backyard. Your story helped me stop apologizing for needing something of my own. Thank you. A week later, I got another letter, then another. Some came with sketches, some with nothing but a single sentence. I thought I was done. Now I think I'm just beginning. I printed every letter, taped them to the studio wall. They weren't fan mail. They were echoes, and I listened. The day I passed by the Hale estate again, almost a year after I last stood on those steps, it was purely by accident. I had taken a different route back from the lumber yard, not realizing where the curve in the road would lead me. But there it was, the wrought iron gate, the manicured hedges, the grand house that once made me feel so small. I pulled over, just for a moment. I didn't go in, didn't need to, but I stood on the sidewalk and looked at that place. Not with anger, not with pain, just distance. They had taken nothing from me that I hadn't already chosen to leave behind, and they would never get the version of me I'd become. The studio's 1-year anniversary came quietly. We didn't throw a party, just opened the doors like any other day. But that morning, as I swept the front step and arranged the display, my mother came by with a small box. Inside was an old photo I had never seen before. It was me at age 10, sitting beside my father on a workshop stool, watching him carve. My eyes were wide, my hands folded, as if I already knew that something sacred was happening there. Something I would carry with me long after he was gone. My mother kissed my cheek. He saw it in you, she whispered, before you ever saw it in yourself. That afternoon, I nailed the photo to the wall behind my workbench. Not to honor the past, but to remind myself that the beginning was never about where I'd been hurt. It was always about where I'd been shaped. So here's the truth. I didn't win some grand victory. I didn't get revenge or headlines or an apology from those who tried to break me. What I got was better. I got peace. I got purpose. I got my name, not in someone else's shadow, but carved into something I built with my own hands. And every time I hear the studio bell ring and someone walks in with hesitation in their eyes, I know what they're really asking isn't, Can you make this? What they're really asking is, can I still begin again? And I always answer the same way. Yes, yes, you can. This wasn't a story of revenge. It was a story of rebuilding, from the grain up, of finding strength not in noise but in staying. If you've ever been dismissed, doubted, or quietly replaced, let Emily's journey remind you, you don't need legacy to leave a mark. You don't need approval to begin again. And the quiet work of healing is still power. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. And always remember, you are not broken. You're becoming. And that matters.